guys, it's your Virgo Queen Brandy here. And this is the second video in the road trip series, and today we're going to be talking about Texas and New Mexico. But first, let's start with Texas. Taylor and I have both been to Texas several times in our lives, so we didn't necessarily plan on doing anything for real while we were there except for sleeping, but that doesn't mean that we didn't see anything cool. And before we get into all of that, I'm gonna let Taylor take it over so she can give you an overview of our Texas experience.
Texas has always been one of my favorite states. My aunt has lived there for at least 10 years. So we've kind of vacationed there a couple times, visited. We've been to Galveston, which is about 30 minutes from her house. She lives on the outskirts of Houston, but you know, we've seen the Astros play. We've been to Kima Boardwalk, a couple different things, a couple different monuments throughout Texas. I enjoy how prideful that state is. If I was from there, I'd be just as proud, so I don't blame them one bit. And I mean, the Astros, you know, just won the championship, so that's great. So just another thing for them to brag about. But other than that, the Alamo was really nice to finally see. So Houston, or well, Galveston had kind of been the furthest west that I'd ever been, and then we made it to the Alamo, and that was pretty great. San Antonio, just to kind of, because that was the furthest west that I'd ever been, so just to kind of be there at that moment, it was kind of surreal. You know, and the Alamo, we've learned about that throughout history for so long, and it kind of did a lot for Texas and, you know, for their history as a state. So it was really great to be there in that place and kind of feel those feelings and those memories from what happened there. But other than that, I had a great time going through Texas. I loved the wind farms with all the wind turbines, and it was great to see my aunt. They got us some great Mexican food. So all in all, it was a great trip.
One of the cool things about being in Texas is that the Alamo was 10 minutes away from the hotel that we were staying in. So the next morning before heading out, we decided to pop on in for a little bit of history. For those of you who don't know, the Alamo was where the Texans were held under a 13-day siege by Mexican troops in 1836 during the Texas Revolution. The Alamo fell on the 13th day with few survivors left, most of which were women and children. After its fall, several men from across the country and Europe joined the Texas Revolution and defeated the Mexican army at the Battle of San Jacinto. Being in this area gave me an overwhelmingly sad feeling, but I at least had solace knowing that their lives weren't lost in vain. If you're ever in Texas and you're looking for a place to feel both inspired and humbled, then the Alamo is definitely a place that I would recommend to go.
There are secrets buried inside that you ought to know.
So another cool thing that we ended up seeing first in Texas, and then we actually saw it in a bunch of states out west, were wind farms. Oh my God, look how Oh my god, this is so cool! I'm gonna get out my Snapchat and like put some of this on Snapchat. That's what I'm getting out right now. Oh my god! So for those of you who don't know, a wind farm is a large area of land that has humongous windmills everywhere, and what they're doing is they're transforming the wind into energy. And I thought that was really cool because I've always heard about them, and living in the South I've never really seen anything like that, but it was really cool. And yeah, I was really excited. Now that was pretty much it for Texas, and the next stop that we're going to talk about is New Mexico.
So honestly, New Mexico surprised me. You know, you never really hear much about New Mexico as a state. So I kind of wasn't expecting much, and I'm not meaning that in a bad way. I wasn't prepared for just how beautiful it was. We actually went through, we camped. This was the only time we camped. It was in New Mexico, and it was freezing, literally below freezing. I think it was 20 degrees when we woke up. So we were so cold. We got up super early and left because I don't know about Brandy, but I was freezing. But we actually left. We camped at Turquoise Trails Campground, and then took the Turquoise Trail out, and we stopped off at the Los Pecos National Park, which we actually didn't plan. That was just, we just happened to look in the area and found something that looked interesting. So we stopped off there, had a good time. Again, something we totally weren't expecting, that kind of blew our minds, but made it through there. And then we stopped on the way. We stopped for Billy the Kid's gravesite. I say that because, you know, there's so many conspiracy theories, but that was really great. And I don't know if Brandy remembers this, but, you know, when Brandy was at his gravesite having her moment, at his gravesite, not hers. I actually heard whistling, and, you know, that's what Billy the Kid was famous for, so that was kind of crazy. But New Mexico was great. Definitely wouldn't mind going back.
So, I actually do remember the whistling, and it was actually really interesting because I was still at Billy the Kid's gravesite, and Taylor had gone on and walked onto the car, and while she was gone and I was out there by myself, I heard whistling, and it was crazy because there was nobody else out there. And so I walked on back to the car, and I asked Taylor, I was like, hey, were you whistling? And she's like, no, I thought that was you. And we're just like, oh my god, Billy the Kid is whistling at us, how crazy. For those of you who don't know who Billy the Kid is, he was an infamous American outlaw from the mid-1800s. His real name was Henry McCarty, but he also went by William H. Bonney. He was part of the group known as the Regulators. It is said that he killed 21 men, but the true number is uncertain. The story goes that Sheriff Pat Garrett shot and killed Billy. However, the sheriff was a friend of the kid, so there are theories that he staged the incident and helped Billy escape. This theory is backed up by the fact that there have been a few men to come forward in the later years claiming to be the outlaw, but none of their claims have been verified. That night, we made it to the Turquoise Trail campgrounds, and we got there probably around 10 o'clock, and we ended up sleeping in below 20-degree weather, so it was freezing. And If it wasn't for not being able to cover my face without smothering myself, I think I would have been fine, but my face was honestly the part that was freezing the most. Because of that, we got up at the crack of dawn the next day and headed out to our next location.
Yeah, it's the sweetie. You guys ready?
Here we go. 내 모든 걸 완벽히 해제시켜버린 너. I think I'm losing control. Oh yeah. 이 달콤한 게 내게 해로울 리 없잖아. 널 사랑하고 싶어. 사람인 게 맞나? 이토록 아름답나? 내게 웃는 저 얼굴 좀 봐. 사람인 게 맞나? 전부 꿈은 아닌가? 내 모든 걸 다 주고 싶어. 내가 왜 이럴까? 부럽던 욕심이 자꾸 내 안에서 커져가. 나도 모르던 네가 깨어난 것 같아. 네 사랑 때문에 너 때문에 너 하나 때문에 그래 네가 내게 웃어. 눈 뜨면 제일 먼저 떠오르는 네 얼굴 보지 않고 못 견디고 yeah. 한 번도 이별한 적 없는 사람처럼 널.
So, one of the main reasons why we wanted to go to New Mexico in the first place was to go and see some pueblos. So, our last stop in New Mexico, of course, had to be the Pecos National Forest. And Taylor's going to tell you all about it.
While in New Mexico, Brandy and I decided we wanted to visit some Pueblo sites. Pueblos were what Native Americans, or some Native Americans of the West, used to live in. And neither one of us had ever seen a Pueblo site before. So Brandy Googled the nearest site to us, and it just so happened to be Los Pecos National Historical Park. Within this park, there's some Pueblo remnants as well as a Spanish church. So we actually found out that this area dates back 7,000 years. 7,000 years. It's crazy, right? So they actually have evidence of nomadic hunters stopping through and utilizing this area as far back as 5,500 BC. They don't really start getting pottery remnants or things along those lines until about 800 AD, but this site was utilized nonetheless. So this area, or well, this village was about 25 miles southeast of Santa Fe. It's located within the Sangre de Cristo mountain range. I'm probably butchering that word, and will probably butcher many more words. But this area is known as a valley. It has the Glorieta Creek and the Los Pecos River running through it. So it's kind of like a little haven in the desert per se. So that's why archaeologists think that this area was utilized so frequently, because of its assets, its utilities. So the Spanish actually did not arrive in Los Pecos until about 1400, 1500 AD. At this time, the Los Pecos people were booming. They were at about their height of 2,500 citizens. And that was actually in the Pecos Pueblo, which is the remnants that you can find up if you take the trail. Um,
Oh yeah, the sign says do not enter.
It's probably super fragile.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, but the Spanish actually described this village as a strong village 4 stories high. Now that's without heavy machinery. That's all manual labor, piling stones, making stones, creating this 4-story high pueblo. The Spanish also mentioned that on the first floor or the first story, they didn't have doors, but they had ladders that they would raise up if they felt threatened, which I think is ingenious, especially at this time. And it is also very important to note that at this time, when Los Pecos was booming like this, they were basically a trading post between the Plains people, the buffalo hunters, and the Rio Grande Valley people. They acted as a trading post where turquoise, buffalo hides, pottery, crops, because at this time the Los Pecos people had actually learned agriculture, excuse me, using corn and beans and squash. It's thought that those came up from Mexico, those seeds and those agricultural practices. So, but they had all of these different things going for them. They were kind of like a middleman trading these different things between Native American tribes that kind of also would utilize that area and stop maybe on a trip, a hunting trip or something like that. Also found at the Los Pecos Park are kivas, or ceremonial rooms used by Puebloan society for religious purposes. I can't remember the exact specifications, but the one thing that I do remember is that they do have a certain opening for the spirits to travel in and out from the spirit world into the kiva. So that's pretty exciting, pretty cool to know. It is also important to note that when the Spanish arrived, they began converting the Los Pecos people to their religion. The Los Pecos people did go with the converting for a little while, but eventually there was a revolt. Around 1680, the Los Pecos people revolted against the Spanish and burned a lot of things, including the first church that the Spanish had built on this site. Now, the revolt was short-lived. The Spanish kind of took back the area around 1692-ish, somewhere around in there, almost 1700 mark. This also happened to lead to the decline of the Los Pecos people. Famine from cattle encroachment, raids from neighboring tribes, and a decrease in trade with neighboring tribes in the area, as well as disease brought in by the Spanish people caused the Los Pecos population to diminish. It wasn't until about the mid-1800s that the last people left from the Los Pecos Pueblo left the area and went to the Yemez Pueblo. I'm probably also butchering that. But you can actually still find people of the Los Pecos descent in this area.
So that's all we've got for Texas and New Mexico. The Pueblos were really cool. I just realized that I hadn't given really any opinion on them yet, and they were really cool, and they're actually the first set of Pueblos that we saw, and we got to see several more, so spoiler alert, sorry. And so just stay in tune so you can see more Pueblos. We actually get to see some really, really cool ones. And I just want to make a note here and say, you know, if you're able to, please support the national park system. They do so much more than just, you know, preserve the environment and everything that's, you know, that entails the environment, as in like plants and animals and all that kind of stuff. But they also preserve history, which like the National Pecos for like historical park, you know, shows that like it's a historical park. And I really think that more people should visit national parks more and, you know, get in touch with our history. I also want to say, you know, thank you for your patience. I understand that there's a lot of time between the first video and this one. And please understand that Taylor has started a new job and she wants to do really well at this job. So a lot of her time is taken up. And I also, you know, I'm a pretty busy person. Most of you who are watching this probably know me and know that. So I just want to say thank you for your patience. And I'm not quitting. Like, I'm gonna keep doing this and keep trying, and I'm trying to figure out the editing. Like, I make a few mistakes here and there, and I know that, and I'm working on it. But I'm really grateful to have y'all watching, and I just hope that y'all tune in for the next video, because it's all about our favorite place, like, on the entire trip. So I can't wait to tell you guys. Yeah, I'll see you on the next video. Peace.